Hey, hey, welcome to Film Fanatics, three film geeks discussing movies both new and old. My name is Dan.
My name is Justin.
And I'm Giuseppe.
This week, the latest Disney live-action fairy tale, Cinderella, hits the big screen, along with a much-anticipated Frozen short. The seniors go back to the Best Exotic Marigold Hotel. Vince Vaughn has some unfinished business, and we'll review Oscar-nominated foreign film Timbuktu and the new-to-DVD The Guest. And speaking of Frozen, number 2 has been announced, and we'll talk about that, plus some other recently announced sequels. Our triple feature of older films is Behind the Candelabra, Joe's pick for old classic 12 Monkeys, and 1950 Oscar nominee The Asphalt Jungle. First, though, we start with Cinderella, a big $67 million opening weekend for this one, and Justin's going to tell us about it.
When her father passes away, Ella, played by Lily James, is left at the mercy of her wicked stepmother, played by Cate Blanchett, who reduces her to being a servant. Refusing to give up hope, Ella meets a fairy godmother, played by Helena Bonham Carter, who grants her the ability to go to the ball and dance with the prince, played by Richard Madden, who's looking for a bride. Personally, I think the story of Cinderella is a bit overtold and, frankly, kind of overrated, but what saves it is a really talented cast and the very clever eye of director Kenneth Branagh. I think Lily James is definitely perfect for the role, though I think sometimes she's a little too overly lovable. It's my biggest issue with Cinderella is I think she's kind of one-dimensional. But the film as a whole is really, really beautiful to look at, albeit occasionally distracting with some of the CGI shtick at times. Unfortunately, not all of Branagh's attempts at quirky humor interjected within some of the sequences work, and he also decides to add in new additions to sort of expand upon the story, which I personally found a little hit or miss. But I thought this was a really respectful and entertaining live-action remake of the fairy tale that I think does what it needs to do. I give it a B.
Joe, how about for you?
Well, I've never really been a big fan of Disney's Cinderella. It's not that I dislike the story, but the Disney version is just one of my least favorites. Kind of like Pinocchio, there are some aspects of it I think that I had a different perspective on it when I was a kid, so maybe we need to give it another watch again. I thought this one actually follows that film almost to the T. However, the performances are good. The visuals are excellent. I thought it was a very pretty looking movie, and I think that they do have a really good sense of humor. I actually have to disagree with you there, Justin. I liked a lot of some of the humor, like some of the transitions where the animals are getting turned into people, and they make little jokes. I thought that was kind of funny. I like the fact that it wasn't taking itself too seriously. And the only real negative to the movie is really just the obvious potential for a more amazing story. You mentioned that he tries to add elements to flesh it out to make it a little more extensive, and it kind of seems like it's going to go somewhere, but they don't really do anything with any of those elements. And you can see they added elements to flesh it out, but just kind of falls short of better adaptations like Ever After, which definitely tells the story the best. Overall, it's an enjoyable film. I also give it a B.
Well, for me, this falls somewhere between Disney's two big live-action tellings of classic tales. You've got the wonderful, great and powerful Oz, and the underwhelming Maleficent. Cinderella takes a straight-ahead approach with the story, unlike those other two films, and doesn't add too many flourishes. You guys are right, there's a few extra touches here and there, but it just basically turns their animated movie into a live-action one minus the songs. And I really appreciated that, because unlike you guys, I sort of like the story of Cinderella. So I like that they did that. I think some of the casting actually could have been a little bit better, especially the Wicked Stepsisters.
Yeah.
I think we saw two great examples of that in Into the Woods retelling of the Cinderella's part.
I was thinking the same thing.
And Cate Blanchett actually, for me, started out a little bit shaky, surprisingly. But the whole movie, I thought, started out a little shaky, which might be blamed on Branagh's directing. But then once it finds its footing about 20 minutes in, it really goes full steam ahead. One of the great casting choices, though, here is James as Cinderella. She has this great innocence that's perfect for the role. And the colors in this film practically pop off the screen. I thought, Joe, you said it, it's beautiful to look at.
It's very good.
And a near unrecognizable Bonham Carter is great as the fairy godmother.
Best part.
Top it off with a great message, and it is a winner. It's a B+ for me. I'm a little bit in between you guys with the humor. I thought some things worked, some things not so much. But really, neither of the three movies that we talked about, I mean, like Maleficent's humor really fell flat, and Oz was sort of like hit or miss. So maybe that's not the Disney live action strong point is the comedy.
Guess not.
Nah. They're trying to punch it up to like appeal to kids, and I don't think it needs it, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I don't either. I agree. I do think, I mean, when everything's changing, I think you do want to add the humor there.
Oh, that's
And
where it
I
works
think that's
best.
when it. Yeah, I think that's when it works.
Well, that's the best part. I
because
thought
the fairy godmother's always comedic.
Well, she was
Yeah.
funny. I mean, for me, she was the best part of the movie. Like her whole sequence, like she was obviously having fun with it, and they were kind of just making fun of the whole idea of the fairy godmother
Right.
and transforming. And it was fun. Like my favorite line in the movie was the one Goose string is like, "I can't drive. I'm a goose." Like that's funny. You know, that's funny.
Yeah, it's not bad.
I thought the casting was good. I mean,
The stepsisters, they did nothing for me, especially when put next to Into the Woods from just 2 months ago.
Definitely.
You know?
it's the problem is I don't know if it's necessarily the casting though. It's the fact that, like I said, and as Justin mentioned, just fleshing out those story elements. They didn't really give them much to do. Like even Kate Blanchett's stepmother, her performance was fine, but we barely got to even understand this woman. She's actually less defined than she was in the animated movie. So it's not necessarily her fault.
And then they had this whole, like, let's make her more or less of an anti-villain subplot, which is interesting, but they...
Kind of falls flat if you ask me.
It just is skirted around the edges.
There's a part towards the end of the movie where where Cinderella kind of gives her this line. It's supposed to have this big impact. I know what they're going for, and I mean I've seen it done better in other movies. I think Ever After is the best example, as I said.
Ever After
which
is
like
a phenomenal telling of this story.
I mean, it's the best telling
For sure. Yeah.
And that's fine. But I could see that there, and I just feel like it didn't have as much impact because really we didn't get to see enough. We get the idea, but it's almost like the writers say, "Hey, everyone knows the story. We don't need to go into detail." So I just feel like if they had a lot of elements there to really add another element of depth to the story, like there's another little conspiracy with
I liked that,
with
actually, a lot.
with Skarsgård.
Yeah.
And I thought that was good, but that was barely there. It's like, haha, we're going to mention it's going to kind of go half somewhere, and then we'll drop it because we're going to go with the main story again. So this movie could have been a lot bigger and better. I just wish they had followed through with some of those ideas. As a Shakespearean director, it's like they wanted to go for that.
Right.
And he reined himself in a little bit. So this movie could have been like as good as Oz, I think. Really.
Okay.
When it came out, I was thinking, can Branagh tone himself down to a kid-friendly audience? I think for the most part he does. I just am not entirely sure how comfortable he feels with it, which I feel like was the biggest pitfall for Cinderella. We have all these moments where it's telling a legit story, but then
Subtext that goes along with it. You know,
Yeah.
you've read about it in texts and
but
whatnot.
it's
And
like,
it makes sense with the story.
oh no, I'm not denying that.
Yeah.
I'm
And I
just
mean,
saying.
once again, Ever After, big subject.
Yeah,
of the
that is
movie.
true.
You need to see that, Justin. Trust me.
Oh yeah,
Also,
Someday.
just want to give a little nod to Derek Jacobi though. Played the king. He played
Oh, yeah, he was good.
the
Yeah.
Master briefly in Doctor Who. So
Okay.
he's a classic Shakespearean actor. I thought he was a good addition. I think he played a more serious version of the father this time.
Okay.
So I liked him.
I think the prince actually was rather basic as well. That wasn't one of my
Yeah, he
favorite
was kinda
casting
bland.
choices either.
He wasn't the best, but I thought he could have been worse. I thought he was decent. I thought he fit the bill fine.
Yeah, he was okay.
To be perfectly honest, the prince normally isn't that widely dimensional of a character anyway. So
no, that's
you
true.
know, I think he did more with what the original film had. That's something.
Well, yeah, I mean, all of those Disney princes from the early days are pretty basic.
Pretty one
Yeah.
note.
Yeah,
Unfortunately.
I would agree with that for sure. Now, what'd you guys think of the Frozen short, Frozen Fever?
loved it.
See, I found it underwhelming. Joe, yeah, what'd you think of it, Joe? I'll tell you why in a second then.
I liked it, but I thought it was too long for a short.
Okay, I did too. I thought it was too long. It's almost entirely a song. It's like an 8-minute song, which, I mean, the song was okay, but I didn't think it was that funny.
I thought it
To
was
be honest.
nice, but I didn't really feel like it was necessary.
No. And I feel like, obviously, we'll talk about the whole sequel that was just announced later on in the show, but I feel like there was a lot of hype. I mean, when do you hear about, oh, this movie's featuring the so-and-so short? There's a lot of hype surrounding this.
Well, given that the Frozen fandom is like 1 inch away from being a cult.
Well,
I understand that, but so make a better short. Like, if you compare this to some of the recent film adaptation shorts, like the Monsters U short, where they're at the dorm,
party.
the party, like that was great. Or Rex in the tub with Toy Story. I mean, I thought those were much better than this. So you really liked it.
I did. I thought
Okay.
I thought the song really worked. I personally think Olaf is getting way too much screen time.
And they didn't give him any funny lines.
No, but
Like,
I
I
mean,
really enjoyed him in the movie, but he was just kind of there.
he's slowly turning into like stereotypical, adorable Disney sidekick because mandatory.
well, that was kind of his.
I mean, he's the
destiny.
breakout character.
He does get one funny moment in the short, but otherwise I thought like just in terms of basic premise, decent song number, fits with the tone of Frozen. Nice little shout out to what happened to the villain of the original of Frozen prior.
I did like that.
Yeah, that was good.
I felt like it was a scene from another movie. Like, I feel like that's what they did.
Yeah,
They
like
just
they
took a
cut it
scene
out.
from one of their songs and said, here's a part of Frozen 2.
Yeah, I mean, I thought the song was okay.
It wasn't bad. It was just too long.
But yeah, it was too long. I think if they had cut the song down maybe in half, because some of the songs in the actual movie are only
2-3 minutes.
2 minutes. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know. All right, well, I'm glad you liked it. We'll hear everybody's thoughts, I guess, on Frozen 2 a little bit later on. But now we've got another sequel, and that's the second best exotic Marigold Hotel, and Joe is going to talk about that.
It's interesting that it's called the second best because you'd think, generally speaking, the second best is not the best, therefore
Correct.
wouldn't be as good as the first. So I think it's a really interesting choice for a title. But the second best exotic Marigold Hotel is a British comedy/drama film directed by John Madden of football, I guess, and written by Ole Parker, which is another silly name. Apologize. It is the sequel to the 2012 hit film and features an ensemble cast consisting of Judi Dench, Maggie Smith, by Bill Nighy, Dev Patel, and Richard Gere, this time around a new edition, among many others. As the Best Exotic Marigold Hotel has only a single remaining vacancy, posing a rooming predicament for two fresh arrivals, Sonny pursues his expansionist dream of opening up a second hotel. That's played by Dev Patel, the young proprietor of the hotel who's partners with Maggie Smith's character. Sonny suspects one arrival, Guy, played by Richard Gere, may be an inspector of a company Sonny wants to enter a partnership with for possible franchise expansion of the hotel. He also deals with the stress of his upcoming wedding. The patrons of the hotel have their own subplots, though most of them aren't that extensive or even really worth mentioning. Having never really seen the first film, I had no idea what to expect, and I wondered how well the uninitiated audience would do. The film starts out interesting, funny, and easy to follow. The problem is that some of the charm of the film seems to either lose its punch or go in even borderline cartoony elements towards the later end. Then again, I suspect the story isn't meant to have much weight, and it mostly doesn't. The only plot allowed to having enough investment or stakes in, really, was the fate of the hotel. Most of the other plots don't have enough time to even be very relevant, so they just end up being predictable. Pleasant, but predictable. I feel that this summarizes the film perfectly. It's nice and occasionally funny, and just probably what the primary audience expects of it. I give it a B-.
Okay. You know, the first film in this series is one that I actually remember more fondly in retrospect. Justin and I went to see it when it was out in theaters, and watching it the first time, I thought a lot of the humor fell a bit flat, and the story was kind of corny, but it's always been hard to deny the superior acting skills of the entire cast.
That's kind of hard to deny. I was like, everybody in the movie's really good, though.
At least in terms of the senior citizen cast. Now, Patel, I feel like, was still finding his comedy footing in that first movie. The second best, though, corrects this, as it's a bit funnier overall than the first. And Patel, who granted is given much more to do here, gels very well with the elder cast, of which Gere is a very welcome addition. I liked his character. But it is another pretty corny story, and you're right, Joe, the film drags in the middle a good bit.
Really, I felt like this movie was just too long, which surprised me.
It doesn't need to be
because
2 hours.
It has a really good
not
start.
even close.
It's like, we could have ended this like a half an hour.
Right. But I think for a very underserved, older movie-going population, you could do much worse, and I also give it a B-. Justin?
In 2012, audiences were treated to one-dimensional characters heading off to an exotic land and find love and happiness in the most cliched, sappy way humanly possible. The acting was decent, but the effort was mostly meh. The sequel? Surprise, more of the same. Maggie Smith is sarcastic, Judi Dench is charming, and I'm fairly confident Dev Patel has in his resume, I must play a naive man-child. It's not an awful watch, and I'm not going to lie, I did laugh maybe once or twice, but it is a ridiculously overlong movie that is unfocused, has many issues, and frankly has a completely blah ending. I give it a C-.
I really think, other than the pacing issues, which it's hard to deny that the movie's like a half hour too long, I think this is a better movie probably than the first one.
I want to say the same. I mean, I'll give you the fact that it's probably funnier. I feel like that also fits in more with your statement that they also have more time to refine it. I think it works best when it's not them trying to do every single person. Instead, focusing on like two things. Like, Maggie Smith has an okay arc at the start, and then they try to come back to it at the end to make her the protagonist, which is weird. And I get what they're trying to do, but then they decide they're not going to do it.
You know what though? I mean, I sort of feel like she's always been the protagonist. You don't think so?
No, I mean, in the first one, the
Well,
very first
not in the first movie, but by the end of the first movie, she is though, and I feel like they continue that
kind
here.
of. I'd say the first one's more Judi Dench's story, but this one it's like they try and do the same. Like, okay, we're going to tell everything in vignettes, and then decide at the end, nope, Maggie Smith is the main character. That's nice, but you're completely betraying the format that you started with.
Yeah, but I mean, the movie starts with Maggie Smith and Dev Patel, so why shouldn't it end there? I mean, they're
Except
the proprietors of the hotel.
Take that sentence back a second.
Okay.
Maggie Smith and Dev Patel. Not Maggie Smith and Dev Patel. Has somebody to play off of it. Instead, at the very end, they decide, nope, it's Maggie Smith's story.
Yeah, but at the same time, his wedding is going on. Their stories dovetail at the end, Justin.
Yeah, big time.
It is. It is. I'm not denying that. But what I'm saying is, they decide, no, she's the main focus. But
I don't agree with that.
But she's not.
Well,
and then they like
no, you're right.
have
She's
this
not.
ridiculously random voiceover that comes in for no reason, has no business being there.
I thought it was pretty decent.
It's like I like what she's saying, but there's no business of it being there when she's not the main character.
She's one of the two main characters, and their stories are the beginning and the end of the film.
Well, technically speaking, it's an ensemble, which means everyone's sort of the main character, theoretically. That's kind of what they're going for.
I mean,
It would be great
guess.
if they were actually staying faithful to that, which
I'm not
both
saying
movies suffer from.
It's not that well balanced. I mean, one of the big issues, I think, with the pacing issue is I feel like it could have easily been the 2 hours, but really they're spending so much time with so many people that a lot of the plots are a little underdeveloped. Like, there are one or two storylines, like all the stories are nice. I like how they end up.
Yeah.
But they spend so little time on them, you know exactly what's going to happen. Like, okay, the romance one with the lady that sleeps around. Okay, how is this going to end?
Right.
Well, that's nice, but I saw that was going to happen. Oh, the one guy that, like, you know...
Richard Gere, Dev Patel's mom.
Dev Patel's mom. Okay, well, the whole twist, like, who is he? Well, called it. Oh, he thought he didn't call it. You know what I mean? Everything's...
Right.
I was going to say, I called it regardless.
You know, regardless, called it. But, you know, the thing is, none of these things are bad, though. They just don't spend enough time on them to make them better. Like, Judi Dench's story was good. Maggie Smith's story, it's good.
Yeah.
All the stories are good. It's just they need to spend more time with them. You can axe one or two of them, honestly. Like, have them, a couple of these other characters say some funny lines, and that's pretty much all they needed to do.
I really could have cared less for the Dev Patel romantic love triangle subplot, which was...
I was
liked
on board with it, yeah.
Honestly,
I liked
the
it.
Dev Patel story is the most important one in the movie.
Yeah.
It is important, but it's also incredibly generic.
It's generic, but I mean, I feel like it still works fine. It doesn't necessarily mean it's bad. It functions properly. There's enough energy in it to keep it lively. I've seen it done a lot worse.
Well, and in the first movie, he is there for comic relief, I guess, and not much else. I mean, he has barely a story in the first one. I like that they brought him front and center in this one.
I don't know. I mean, they've played his character so much like a cartoon character that I feel like bringing him front and center was not a good idea.
There might have been a little too much of him, but acting that way. But I think that, for the most part, I enjoyed it.
You gave it the same grade as Chappie, so of the Dev Patel movies in March, which would you prefer? You would prefer Chappie, I guess.
No, I prefer this one.
Is that right?
Really?
Yeah,
Okay.
like
Interesting.
Like Chappie, I really liked for specific elements. Like, I thought Chappie was awesome, but that whole thing with the Die Ontowood propaganda,
Right.
just
Awful.
drags down the movie. Like, I like it for a lot of the sci-fi stuff. Like, the action was good, and I could watch it again, sure. But this movie, I guess it's not as daring, but I mean, it suffers a little less. So because of that, so
Okay.
I think overall, well,
you
okay,
could say
there's-
certainly this movie speaks to its core audience more than Chappie.
yes, actually, the one thing I would say different to answer that question, that for me, I actually liked all the characters for the most part in Marigold, and I thought the acting was much better.
Okay.
Half the characters
is
I did
true.
not like in Chappie, and pretty much those same characters, their acting was not that great. So
Right.
because of that alone, I like Marigold a little better, even though Chappie's definitely much more my kind of movie.
Okay.
Though I'm interested in the first one. You think this one's better than the first one?
Slightly. I gave the first one a C+. So, I mean, I think they both have their merits. This one's just... If this one wasn't as long as it is, it's probably like a B or maybe even higher.
I do agree that
So-
Richard Gere was pretty good in the movie.
Yeah. I think the story is better here. I love the addition of Gere's character.
What about Wilkinson? I guess he was kind of switched around with Gere.
Yeah, Wilkinson was in the first one only.
Okay. Well,
I like a good Wilkinson.
okay, so
I do.
If you had to compare, like, do you think that his absence there would be felt, or
To be honest, because the plot here revolves around Richard Gere, and I like the plot better in this one, No, I would keep Gear.
Okay.
And I'm not much of a Gear fan.
I know, that's why I was
Actually,
trying to say you
you
liked
know?
it.
To speak about that briefly,
Yeah.
the one thing I will give the first Marigold Hotel a huge advantage over this one is there is one subplot with Wilkinson that has a lot of substance and a lot of depth. The problem is that's there for about 15 minutes and then is gone for the remainder of the movie. This, nothing.
Well, I feel like this movie is kind of just a feel-good movie. So it's kind of one of
I
those
feel like
things.
this is more like a 100-foot journey kind of movie.
That's a good example.
You know?
Though I think 100 Foot was better than this.
I do believe 100 Foot was better than this. But speaking of Tom Wilkinson, let's move on to Unfinished Business. When Dan Trunkman, played by Vince Vaughn, finds the demands of his sales job too demanding, he decides to go Jerry Maguire and start his own company, and is joined by just two others. One elderly and just fired from Dan's old company, played by Wilkinson, and one very young and mentally challenged, played by Dave Franco.
I guess.
After a year of hard times, the trio make a last-ditch trip to Berlin to close what they hope is a deal that will save the company. But wait, Dan's old boss is there to make the same deal. Are you laughing yet?
Neither are we.
Unfinished Business is really dumb, even for Vince Vaughn. Now, I like Vaughn. He can usually bring laughs just from his delivery, but here even his laughs are kind of sparse, as they have been a bit recently. Wilkinson adds nothing, and though Franco has some alright lines, he is just too dumb to be believed. There's one particular scene where he doesn't know the difference between a square and a rectangle. Come on. There's a few things with Dan's family that start out a bit forced, but I actually thought landed pretty well by the end, and Nick Frost adds a little bit in his few scenes. It's a D+ for me. Justin, the Vaughn hater.
The Vaughn hater. Here we go. In the long line of bad Vaughn-fronted movies we've had recently, this one does little to break the streak. Admittedly, I think it's mostly because the script is absolutely terrible, and at times even offensive in ways that make the Tropic Thunder controversy look like Bambi. But none of the leads do anything to even remotely try to make this film work. The delivery's bad, the comedy's tasteless. It's just so pointless on such a grand scale. I will admit the strange parenting, albeit kind of out of place subplot, was slightly, if only so much, interesting. And I was curious to see how that would resolve. And for that reason, I can't really fail it in good conscience. I give Unfinished Business the first D- of 2015.
Okay. Joe?
There's another name for the movie. I think Unfinished Business is the title, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
I think it should be called Unfinished Script or Unfinished Ideas or something. But I completely forgot about this movie until a friend asked me what I thought about it.
That's bad.
And I saw
it a couple days ago.
I saw it like last week.
Yeah.
I feel that the actors have energy and there is potential for something somewhere in here. However, most of the jokes just fall flat, and the main plot isn't even explained or makes any sense. What is their business? Why do they meet this person? Why do they go to meet that person? What was the importance of them meeting this person except to set up this dumb scene, which you think is supposed to be funny, which is basically the whole movie? The actual business aspect of this plot is practically non-existent. Now, I know it's just a weak setup for the hijinks, but then your situations better really be funny. Sadly, they are not. But I do agree that the family plot was kind of decent, and I'm in between you guys. I give it a D.
Okay. Yeah, somehow the family plot came out of this as the best part of the movie.
The drama aspect was actually like almost okay, you know, which is weird.
They had actually gone somewhere with it.
Yeah, like if it
But
actually
it does go somewhere.
Yeah, I know.
It kind of does. It's like
It's all right. It matches enough.
it's like for every like 5 hijinks, they try to like bring it back in some vicinity, and
Yeah, but I mean, it's an R-rated comedy. You're not going to focus too much on the family drama aspect.
But it's the best thing
I
in the
understand
movie.
say.
that. I understand that. If they wanted to go and make it a drama, it would have been a better
Well,
film.
like if they had actually taken this out of like the same characters, but went back and just focused on Vince Vaughn and his family, maybe have like some aspects of the business around that, and make Wilkinson and Franco like a subplot in the movie with like their own story, and just have him dealing with
have them be like the quote-unquote comic relief, I guess.
yeah, maybe like in the background,
Make
like
their characters better,
like the
but-
side characters. If this was like an Apatow movie,
Yeah.
and the main thing's Vaughn, his family dealing with the son and his daughter.
I actually would have been fine with
like that whole idea,
Yeah.
like that would have been okay.
yeah.
Like,
You're absolutely right. The business aspect of this movie makes no sense.
like I tried to figure out their company,
I don't
what they
think-
do, who they're working for.
I mean,
who
I
they're
don't think
with.
that they really care?
But-
I think they know it's confusing
But the
and
thing
doesn't
is,
matter.
every
But
single section of the movie that involves it, I'm like, what is even happening?
No.
They do explain a little bit of their business stuff. It's just
Barely.
It's literally
And it-
on screen for
like-
3 seconds, and,
even-
then they take it away.
And maybe this is just me thinking
the
too much about it.
explanation of what they sell.
But there's so much lacking of any kind of laughs to distract me that I was thinking, we know generally what their business is, but what does their company do?
Mm-hmm.
I don't even know.
And how are they paying for all of these airplane flights?
They have no
all
money.
The time if they
They're
have
that
no
broke.
money.
Why are they taking these two guys
You
along?
know?
Only Vince Vaughn needs to go.
Right, only
He's
Vince Vaughn needs
wasting
to go.
So much money. It's like
Clearly, you don't bring Dave Franco.
no.
I was gonna
because-
say.
What does that
He adds
benefit you
nothing.
in any way? It's infuriating.
Yeah.
Just
But Tom Wilkinson is wasted here. I get that he's trying to spread his wings and do a bit of comedy. I've never seen him do much comedy. His character in Marigold Hotel, like we said, it was kind of the dramatic component.
Literally,
Yeah,
the funniest thing I've ever seen him play was when he played Falcone in Batman Begins when he was getting attacked by the Scarecrow, and his scream was hilarious.
I forgot about that.
That is the funniest I've ever seen Tom Wilkinson, and I think that was unintentional.
That was unintentional
so,
laughs.
The guy,
So, God bless him.
Just-
Comedy isn't for him.
just go back to
okay.
drama again. For
It's
like,
okay.
I mean, now Justin would say comedy isn't for Vince Vaughn either. Now, I think Vaughn
I still like
is...
Dodgeball.
I know, that's your one example. If you don't like Dodgeball, you're not human. I mean, Dodgeball's a great movie.
Vince Vaughn is
But-
kind of like Adam Sandler. I think he had his high point, and he just had a lot of rough spots lately.
What I like about Vince Vaughn, and I think why he's so polarizing, is because I find his style and his delivery to be funny, even if he's not necessarily delivering hilarious lines. Here, I don't think we get a lot of that, unfortunately.
Actually, he was trying to hold himself back from his shtick a little
Yes, I think so too, and unfortunately, the script isn't strong enough for him to do that.
bit. I don't know.
I got to give him points for at least trying to go away from the whole I'm going to keep monologuing my comedy and hope that I hit something on like
I don't know.
30th joke.
I thought that his performance was okay. I mean, I don't really think Vince Vaughn's a bad person.
I do too, but it wasn't funny.
No, comedically, no.
And this is supposed to be a
But I see what you're saying. I think that might be one reason you
You
don't
know?
like him that much, Justin, because you're right. His delivery comes up in a lot of reviews I've read. Some people like the stuttering thing.
very
Some people
polarizing.
don't. It's like if you like it, you don't.
Right.
You do, you don't.
Which
But,
comedy is.
which is that? So I mean,
Yeah.
like, that's just is what it is. And I think it's funny too.
Yeah.
So there you go.
I typically like it, but there's just nothing here. Dave Franco has a couple of funny lines, but like,
Look.
his character is so
Annoying.
offensive and terrible.
It's so wrong.
Cannot stress the offensive part enough.
Yeah, I just
Yeah,
God bless him, but
It was too much.
yeah.
Completely.
Basically, unfinished business is bad. Don't see it.
Yeah, that's the takeaway here. Okay, so up next is one of the movies that was nominated for an Oscar at this year's awards, and that was for Best Foreign Film, and that is Timbuktu. Justin?
Kidan, played by Ibrahim Ahmed, is a cattle herder living peacefully in the dunes away from the city, where jihadists attempt to control all means of the people's faith by any means necessary. However, when a local fisherman decides to murder one of his cattle, Kidan's once simple life faces a dramatic change for the worse. Timbuktu is a film with many parts peppered with a little subtext, which I liked. At its core is an almost atmospheric style character study, which is unflinching in its realism and imagery, but rather than having one main focus, Timbuktu has several with many interlocking stories. None of these necessarily stretch the realm of realism, but rather when the film starts to draw the intrigue into one storyline, it decides to focus on another, with one semi-on-the-nose metaphor bookending the film, and you kind of miss the other one in between. It's a really well-told story, and there's a lot of powerful scenes in this and haunting imagery. I leave Timbuktu with an A-.
Yeah, haunting is the word. I mean, the desert landscapes are beautiful, the performances are riveting, but the story is haunting. Somehow the director even seems to find a little bit of humor in all the madness, which I liked. The movie actually reminds me a little bit of 12 Years a Slave in its approach and subject matter.
I was thinking that, actually.
And the fact that this kind of thing isn't something that happened generations ago, like 12 years, but that it's going on right now it just makes the movie unforgettable. I actually might have liked if they delved a touch more into the religious stuff, so we got maybe a fuller picture of the culture, but it's definitely worthy of being one of the Best Foreign Film nominees. I, as well, give it an A-. Joe, it's unfortunate you missed this one, because I think you would have really enjoyed it.
Well, it's still available right now. I'll try and see it if I can.
Yeah. Yeah, unfortunately, it's only in like 40 theaters or something. Like
Not many.
We were very lucky to get it around here.
I'll say.
Comes from Mauritania, which I don't even know what that is, but it was their first ever entry into the nominees.
Good for them.
And they made it. So
Yeah.
Good stuff.
yeah, I thought it was really, really good. The acting is great. Foreign films, I think, have something interesting about them because for the most part we don't know the actors.
No.
You know, I mean, every so often, yeah, there's a Marion Cotillard or whatever, but for the most part, it's always like these new actors to us, and I think that makes it so much more real, especially when the subject matter is this intense. 12 Years a Slave was great, and it was great that we didn't really necessarily know the main characters, but then you see Brad Pitt, you know, with his hammer, and it's like,
Yeah.
all right, you're still Brad Pitt, you know, it's fine. Although Fassbender, we knew him, and he was unrecognizable in that movie, but
Basically, yeah.
but yeah, I thought that gave it another layer of realism. And didn't you think that the desert scenes, even though, you know, you don't normally think of desert, you know, in a third world country as being beautiful, but the way it was shot was really, I thought, wonderful.
Oh, yeah. Easily.
Yeah. I don't know who the director is. I don't know if he's done any other films that we would know of, but I thought he did a really good job with it.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Easily.
And I don't think we've seen any of the other nominees for Best Foreign yet, have we?
Ida.
Oh, that's right. We saw the one that won. Yeah, which we called Ida because we didn't know and it wasn't pronounced for us. But yes, apparently it's called Ida, which I did like. I would say this is a better film than that, though.
Oh, hands down.
I think we were both in the B range or so.
Both good Bs.
With that one. That was, I think, more of an experimental film,
That's fair.
you know, whereas this is a more straight-ahead tale.
Yeah.
But all right, well, let's move into our home media moment, and this week that is The Guest. Joe?
All right. Well, The Guest is a 2014 American thriller/horror film directed and edited by Adam Wingard and written by Simon Barrett. The film stars Dan Stevens, Micah Monroe, Brendan Meyer, and Lance Reddick. A soldier introduces himself to the Peterson family, claiming to be their friend of their son, who died in action in Afghanistan not too long ago. After the young man is welcomed into their home, a series of accidental deaths and other altercations seem to be connected to his presence, and things slowly spiral out of control. I really like this movie a lot, actually. And I have to admit, though, had I not learned a little bit about it before I saw it, I think it would have had a very different impression. So I'm curious to see what you guys think about it. This movie was made in the style of John Carpenter's films, and it's basically one big homage to his action movies, his thrillers, his horror movies. And just like immediately it picked up on that. I just loved the performances, the dialogue. I really love the soundtrack. The soundtrack was just amazing. A lot of this techno stuff. It was a really great throwback and homage. I do think that some of the plot elements are a little bit hokey and are like kind of stretching believability, but I understand that it's just embracing like this kind of awesome camp. And this is just the type of movie that I love. I feel like it's just a modern telling of the 80s action movie thriller and just Carpenter's whole style, which I loved. And this director emulated that perfectly. So if this is a big homage to his type of movies, I loved it. This movie was awesome. I give it an A.
Oh, wow. Now, the star of this movie is apparently on Downton Abbey, which I don't know.
Hey, I loved it.
I don't know him from Adam, but he is a very riveting actor. Handsome, yes, but he has this quality to him that just draws you in.
By the way,
Yes.
I'm glad you said that because there's when the daughter character first meets him, she's kind of like just giving him like this like sob nose, like I don't want to touch him at all, and then opens up the door and he's got his shirt off, and all of a sudden she realizes he's hot.
Yes.
Like, did she just realize this now?
Well, and that's exactly what I was going to say. This quality he has, it draws you in so much that you kind of forgive some of the plot holes of the film,
Definitely.
where everyone seems to be so taken in by this guy, hook, line, and
It's so
sinker,
silly, yeah.
without knowing anything. But I really enjoyed The Guest as well. I did not know that it's from the same director of You're Next while I was watching it. I found that out afterwards. But I was completely unsurprised because shortly after I started The Guest, I, in my mind, made the comparison to You're Next very quickly. It has an incredibly similar tone, and that's such a good thing. I don't know much from Carpenter, but You're Next was one of the pleasant horror surprises of the last few years, and I think this one's even better. It's a great throwback to, you know, fun horror films. It fires on all cylinders. I give it an A-. Justin?
What I think makes a movie like The Guest work is a story that unfolds appropriately and Dan Stevens as the twisted title character. At first it seems like it's going to be yet another character as in actuality a serial killer, but instead takes it in another direction that truly lets Stevens shine in how he manipulates the various situations around him, sometimes allowing for moments of even dark humor, and other times welcoming the mindset of whether or not this character is actually a villain. Similar to Cold in July, I think the 80s retro quality kind of works both for and against it at times, and I think the ending is a little cliche, but overall I thought The Guest was a really solid thriller with more than enough originality than most in the genre that we see anymore. I give it a B+.
I thought the music worked great for it.
I thought it was great. It wasn't like totally 80s. It was like modernized, but in the 80s style. It was just like techno.
It was
rock.
It's
intense.
EDM, but like with an 80s style to it.
Yeah.
It's some industrial. Like it wasn't like from the 80s, but definitely done in that vein.
Well, and especially like as we get more towards the end of the film, I just sort of chalk that up to maybe the theme of the prom was some kind of like 80s
in the
throwback
background.
or whatever, because the last scenes of the movie take place at the prom, or the setting up the prom, I guess I should say. It's not Carrie here.
No. Well, kind of.
Well, actually,
in a way.
a little bit.
Kind of a throwback to that type. So.
Yeah, that's true, actually.
Yeah.
No, this is a lot of fun. We don't see a lot of fun horror movies anymore.
No, it just like it didn't take itself too seriously, but it knows and it just embraces that.
It knew there was a time and a place, which I really liked.
It was fun, and just the presence of that lead. Just they directed him so well. He was just so engaged. I'm like, this is corny, but I just don't care.
And he was like, it's funny because he's like almost robotic in his approach as the character.
Yes.
But the actor is not robotic in playing him. Like I don't know if I'm explaining that makes sense. But
I think that's just
you know what I mean?
Indicative of talent is what that is.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like it's one of those things you just need to actually see in action to understand.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like describing this movie, people would be like, it doesn't sound that interesting. I wasn't that interested based on the synopsis, but watch it. It's just so unique.
Don't think about it. Just sit down and watch it.
It's pure fun. It's pure fun.
So now, you said before you watched it, you knew like a little bit about it.
Well, because I knew that I had to watch it tonight, and I wanted to make sure I didn't know I was leading it. So thankfully, I wanted to look around for it, and I just was curious, wanted to look at the basic synopsis. So I was preparing it, and I just read just some basic background about it, and just saw like it was a love letter to John Carpenter's style. And I'm like,
okay.
Well, I'm interested now. And once I saw it, I just picked up on a lot of those cues immediately, like just Big Trouble in Little China, Escape from New York, The Thing. I just saw like elements of all of it.
Right.
Like the horror, the thrill of the action, just like so Carpenter and just 70s and 80s just horror movies and thrillers. I saw a lot of that there, and I thought that was cool because it's very me.
Well, and I think a lot of horror movies now are going for that style and just missing the mark horribly. And I think Lazarus Effect is a good example of that. Not that they were trying to be more comedic with it like this in parts, but they're trying to go for the tone of like a throwback horror film.
Another good example of that's The Conjuring. I mean, really harnessing this.
Yeah, Conjuring somehow really captured
that older style.
theme.
Yeah.
And I think that just kind of really studying those elements and trying to model it after that while still keeping it fresh is a tough thing to do anyway.
I think that's the difference, maybe. Is that, as we talked about last week with Lazarus, it was completely generic stuff.
And that's the problem with most horror movies.
You're right.
Is that an action, and a lot of those genre films is that they seem to fit with this very basic formula and feel they don't have to go beyond that. And oftentimes, when you look at Unfinished Business,
I don't want to look at it.
Exactly.
I'd rather not. Yeah.
So
I'm good.
It's just another example of just thinking you can go with a basic formula.
Right.
You got to take some time and actually try new things sometimes.
Yeah. And the old adage, everything old is new again. If you find a twist on it, then
it can work.
Right, it can work, and you can make it like an homage to those classics, but still make it a new story. All right. Well, up next, we're going to break from the reviews for a moment and talk about some of these sequels. We already mentioned Frozen 2 was just announced, but there are a bunch of new sequels in the works that were just announced within the past week or two. There's Tron 3 that Disney's going to make. Now, Disney's actually got a whole bunch of these. Tron 3, Frozen 2. They're doing a live-action Dumbo with Justin's favorite Tim Burton directing. There's another new Ghostbusters. So there's the female Ghostbusters. And Ivan Reitman wants to do a whole Ghostbusters cinematic universe. And so now there's another male Ghostbusters coming out with Channing Tatum and possibly Chris Pratt. Independence Day 2 is finally coming out 17 years after the fact.
Just let it go, people.
And Kevin Smith hinted on his Twitter feed about a possible Mallrats 2. So there's a bunch of things coming out.
Old is new
Joe,
again.
old is new again.
Well,
I mean,
give him the list and I'll tell you my reactions.
Okay, so first we've got Frozen 2, which is the biggest no-brainer maybe of all time. Every sequel, every animated success gets a fourth and a fifth these days. So you have to make Frozen 2. It's the most successful globally animated movie of all time.
Yeah.
I mean, after the short, I don't know, but obviously they got to do it, Joe.
Well, I mean, I guess so, but I kind of liked it. Well, I don't know. When it comes to Disney doing sequels, I feel like generally their sequels don't work out.
Mm-hmm.
But then again, usually they just kind of shove them out there to direct-to-DVD or something.
And this
Right.
clearly won't be.
Oh, no. So, I mean, if they can take the time to make it, I do think that the fandom of Frozen is finally starting to annoy me a little bit.
Just
like,
now?
Like, yeah.
I was going to say,
no.
I was there probably 6 months ago, and
No.
that might have been late.
But maybe
Not for me.
I haven't really thought about it too much. But
Yeah.
the fact that, like, people are still talking about it and raving about it, like,
It's a great movie, but it's not that great.
gotta like make the joke, let it go. Like,
Let it go.
Yes.
Yeah, you
so
got to do it.
It's fine. It's getting a sequel, but I like when Disney has more original ideas. I don't want that to get sucked into this
I do
trap
too.
like everybody else is with franchises. So
Right.
Frozen
Yeah,
2
DreamWorks is horrible with it.
lately.
Yeah.
But Frozen 2, I'm happy about it, but I feel like just make sure it's good at least and try to pump out your original ones. I understand that one. What else?
Okay.
Tron
So
3.
we got Tron 3, keeping with the Disney theme.
I'm weird. I'm weird there because I don't like the original Tron that much,
Uh-huh.
which is weird because you'd think I would.
Yeah.
I liked the second one, which I know a lot of people didn't, but I don't think it needs a third movie. So
Yeah, I feel like the story kind of wrapped up pretty nicely there.
the second one, yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm like, well, like the weird thing about it is with the second movie, they took it in a really weird direction. Still kind of managed to make it work, but I never thought there'd be another one.
Right.
So all I can say is this: it'll probably have good visuals.
Well, that is the Tron.
Tron, so
yeah,
I mean-
that is the Tron
So
staple.
as long as it has that, I guess it's doing something right. I don't know.
Justin?
Well, I mean, Frozen 2, I'm kind of with Joe on it. I think as long as it's got a decent story, I'm on board. But I also think the fandom's going out of control. And I really wish people would, in fact, let it go. Tron 3, I can't say the same about Tron Legacy, but I did like it more than the first one. I think it's got a good universe, and I feel like someday someone is going to get the formula right. So I'm definitely all for a third Tron movie.
Okay, well, male Ghostbusters. We already did that. It was called Ghostbusters 1 and 2. And,
Look,
you know, God bless these people, but Channing Tatum, I like him. Is he Bill Murray? Is he Harold Ramis? No. What I liked about the female Ghostbusters is they're
Something
not
different.
trying to redo it. And I feel like with this they kind of are.
To be honest, I was never entirely on board with the female Ghostbusters thing either. I thought that was dumb. My biggest issue is everyone hated the original idea that there should be this expansive Ghostbusters universe. If we're going to do it, just make one series. Don't turn it into 18 other movies. I'm sorry, the Marvel Cinematic Universe is wrong.
You know why, though? Because Sony, as we talked about a month ago, has no franchises except for Bond. And guess who owns Ghostbusters? Columbia Pictures, owned by Sony.
Fair enough.
That's why they want to create an entire world around. I mean, that's my interpretation of it. But we just had a big discussion a month ago about how Sony has no franchises.
No, it makes sense.
So, Joe, what are your thoughts on the new Ghostbusters? The other new Ghostbusters?
I mean, Ghostbusters is almost as confusing now as the Spider-Man thing.
I know. I don't understand.
Like, look, people want Ghostbusters 3. Just give them Ghostbusters 3. That's what they want. I know you say you can't do it. Whatever you got to do.
Well, I think without Ramis, Ghostbusters 3 is kind of a mess. But
I know, but that's what they want to do. That's what
Yeah.
they're basically doing, whether you call it a reboot, rehash, whatever. They're just trying to do some basic
At least
idea
just
of
do
that.
a pass the torch story.
You know, that would be fine. Get like one person. Ernie Hudson will do it. Okay, he'll do anything for money, right? So just let him be there. He'll teach the new Ghostbusters. You can have your sequel. That's what people want. Give them that at least. Now we've got one Ghostbusters that's a separate universe or another one.
I think they're connected.
Well, whatever.
yeah, they're supposed to be connected, I guess.
Okay, it's a connected universe, but that's already too much.
Well, and speaking of too much, I love Chris Pratt as much as the next guy. There are other action people. He's in the Jurassic World series now. He's maybe going to be the new Indiana Jones. He's
Yeah.
going to be in this. Like what?
They're pushing him all over the place now.
He's going to be a little too overexposed with this.
Look,
I feel
with
like.
Star-Lord, he was great, but
Yeah. Oh, right, and of course, Guardians of the
So,
Galaxy.
like, just calm down. He can't work everywhere. Okay,
Right.
he's going to turn you down eventually.
Yeah. All right, so there's that live action Dumbo. Justin, I got to hear from you first because it's Tim Burton.
Dumbo.
Well, as we know after Big Eyes, I've lost faith in Tim Burton.
After Big
Oh,
Eyes.
way too harsh on that movie. But you lost faith in Tim Burton 10 years ago.
Not true.
You haven't liked a movie he's done since Big Fish, I feel like.
Yeah, but I was at least able to justify every one of his movies until that point. I can't say I support it just because it's...
And you love Dumbo.
I do like Dumbo.
Yeah.
Admittedly, that's coming off of childhood, but so take that how you will. Do I think the quirk could work for Tim Burton? Maybe, but it's going to depend on whether or not he can tone down all of his wacky antics. I can't say I'm on board, but I can't say I'm entirely opposed either.
I just don't know about a CGI Dumbo.
Yeah.
You know? I mean, I know they could do great things now with CGI, but, like, I don't know. I mean, didn't we learn our lesson about the CGI animals with the humans, with Garfield?
Yeah,
That CGI was awful.
But
I mean, the movie sucked, too, but...
But we've come a long way since then.
Yeah, I guess that's true, but I mean, this guy Dumbo has to do a lot more than Garfield. Garfield sits around and look terrible. You know?
No argument there.
So, Joe, any thoughts on Dumbo?
Not really a big fan of Dumbo.
Okay. You hate all those early Disney movies.
I don't like the early Disney movies. Don't know why. Dumbo's another one that scared me when I was a kid. Didn't really like it. I do kind of see how the quirk could kind of work for Tim Burton. Kind of. But I don't really know if he's the best person to direct Dumbo.
I know, it's weird.
Like I mean, he's got some variety but
he's done some kids movies.
No, he has. I mean, he's done variety, but it's just like it just doesn't seem like the go-to for me.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know about that.
All right, so we've got Independence Day 2 without Will Smith, but with Goldblum.
As long as Goldblum's in, I'm fine.
And I guess the lead is supposed to be Will Smith's nephew or something.
Is it Jaden?
No, it's not Jaden. It's somebody I never heard of.
I feel like Will Smith should be in it because I feel like that'd be a good idea for him. And really, Will Smith and Goldblum together again would be great. But Goldblum in it, as long as he's in it, I'm fine with it.
You know, you bring up a good point, though. Will Smith, obviously not opposed to sequels. He's done Bad Boys. He's done
Men in Black
many times over. His career isn't that hot right now. You're right. Focus didn't do that well. All the other ones, After Earth,
Winter's
7
Tale.
Pounds, Winter's Tale, I mean, they're all not doing so hot. So you're right. Will Smith could use it. Why not?
I mean, like, I think it would be a great move for him. I mean, I'd love to see it again. I mean, it's got to suffer a little bit without him.
Mm-hmm.
But then again, Goldblum was kind of the main character, so that's sort of
true.
That's okay.
Yeah, it's true.
That's okay.
As long as he's on board.
Like, as long as he's in it, which
Yeah.
I think Goldblum needs another big movie again.
I do too.
People love the Goldblum, but he needs to come back into the forefront
Yeah,
again.
enough with the lay weekends of the world, and let's do another Jurassic Park here.
Like, really, he just had like these bit parts in a lot of these indie movies. Like,
Yeah.
we need to get more of him because people still love him.
Yeah.
And no, I think I'm gonna like it because it's Independence Day 2, like 17 years
I
later.
know. Why are we doing it?
It's like it's just so hilarious.
Because every time we've wanted to do it prior, somebody said no.
And finally, they're saying yes. And when's it coming out? Like July next year or something?
June 26th of, I believe it's 2017? Maybe
That's
it's
what I've heard.
2016. Is it 2017?
That's the last I've heard.
Yeah.
Why not
Is
July?
it still going to be a two-parter?
Two-parter.
I have not heard that, but maybe.
Independence 2 Part 3.
Before
Yeah,
like got,
Independence 2 Part 1? Like what?
before I heard all this stuff, I remember being told it was like going to be called like ID4 Part 1, ID4 Part 2 coming over the course of like 2 years.
Look,
But
basically, it's IDK.
IDK, what they're doing.
Yeah.
But no, I think it's cool because that movie is very popular and it does kind of have like a lot of potential for a bigger universe. I've always wondered a lot about those aliens and learning more. So, I mean, I don't know if it'll be good, but I think
But you're on.
it's kind of awesome that
You're
it's
on
happening.
board.
It's so stupid. It's I'm gonna have to see it.
That's what every executive at the studios want to hear. It's so stupid, I've got to get on board.
Well,
Well, it's how Michael Bay has a career,
That's how it's happening. I mean, that's kind of what the first movie was. It's
Yeah.
stupid, but everybody loves it.
But it was fun.
You know that it
Yeah.
was.
It was a lot of fun.
It was a fun blockbuster, which they don't have many of these days.
That's true. All right, and the last one was just a little trickle of information from Kevin Smith, and that's Mallrats 2. I mean, I personally love Mallrats. I think it is highly underrated. I think people that enjoy the View Askew universe do also like Mallrats, but I don't know if it's got a wide enough audience to have a big sequel like the Clerks franchise.
I feel like he should do Clerks 3, then Mallrats 2.
He is. He's definitely doing Clerks 3. That's
well,
like a guarantee.
As long as he's doing Clerks 3 and that does well, then do Mallrats 2.
Okay.
Sure, like, I mean, I like the characters in Mallrats.
Yeah, I think
2.
Mallrats is great.
Can they get Ben Affleck back after he's Batman? Do like another Batman joke? I'm sure that'd be fun.
Probably they're still buddies, but
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think he probably could get Affleck
good-
back.
good
He
friends.
knows where his career started.
Yeah, so I mean, well, he owes him.
Yeah,
pretty
basically.
much, pretty much. For me, it's more a matter of I'd rather him just do Clerks 3 and the Askew universe on a strong note and just shut the book.
Okay.
I mean, I'm not opposed to Mallrats 2. I enjoyed the first one, not nearly as much as Clerks, but
Well, no, don't think many.
Yeah, I don't think many people would say it's better than Clerks.
I actually like Mallrats almost as much as Clerks, though.
But I think Mallrats is highly underrated. I think it's a hilarious movie.
It's a great movie.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's no Clerks.
Well, is there a big demand for a Mallrats too? Like, I mean,
got a cult following.
Yeah, I mean, it's got a huge cult following, and I think people just want him to continue
Doing
with
the
his
universe.
universe. Yeah.
just please keep doing them.
We can't keep making Tusk.
Yeah, I mean, his last non-View Askew movies are not
Well,
lighting it up at the box office, I would say.
it's Clerks 3 got to be the last one, right? The end.
Well, that's what he said, but then now he's sort of dropping little hints on his tweet.
If you're gonna end it, you probably should end it with a Clerks movie. So
yes,
but then
unless he's going to keep going. And then we've got Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back again.
which would be fine
Which
too.
would be fine, too.
Like, so it's like just.
Which is a good point, because I remember him saying a while back he wanted to do another Jay and Silent Bob movie and then jump back into Clerks 3.
You know what?
Yeah.
Kevin Smith just needs to stop doing the stand-up and just get back to the drawing board.
And he was kind of a frustrating director. Although I mean, his stand-up is great too, and his podcasts are great.
He's a great guy. He's funny, but like, go back to making the movies, man.
Yeah.
Please.
The movies that people enjoy.
Yes.
Yes. All right, so we're going to close, as we always do, with our triple feature of older films, and we start that with Behind the Candelabra. This is a 2013 HBO original film directed by the great Steven Soderbergh and starring Michael Douglas as famously gay piano player Liberace. It focuses on his life with decade-long partner Scott Thorson, played by Matt Damon in the 70s and 80s, and it's mostly told from Scott's perspective, as it is based on his 1988 autobiography. Now, originally this was intended to be a theatrical film, but studios didn't want to touch it with a 10-foot pole, and it was deemed in Hollywood the gayest movie ever made. With apologies to Hedwig, it's not actually the most incorrect statement. But to paraphrase Liberace himself, it's also fabulous. Rob Lowe co-stars as an over-the-top, drug-fueled plastic surgeon, and Dan Aykroyd and Scott Bakula have supporting roles as well that are great. The two leads, though, are completely authentic and give a couple of their strongest performances ever here. Everybody in the film, in fact, is so on board and straddles that line between serious biopic and campy over-the-top comedy. Soderbergh stylizes the film in this way perfectly. And if I have one complaint with it, it's that after Liberace and Scott break up, the movie no longer straddles that line and goes a bit more dark, and as it gets less fun, it gets a little boring. I leave Candelabra with an A-. Joe?
So maybe that's what it was. I couldn't quite put my finger on it.
Yeah.
I'm finally glad I got to see this, so thank you for bringing it.
Yeah, no problem.
Pretty much sure that's why. It's probably some of the best makeup I've ever seen.
Yeah, great makeup.
Like, they make Damon and Douglas look like 20 years younger than they are.
And Rob Lowe looked 20 years older.
Basically.
You know?
Yes, I was blown away by that.
Yeah, Damon looked so young in the beginning.
I had to keep
Baby-faced.
looking,
Yeah.
like thinking, when did they make this? Is this really like?
Yeah, you actually asked when they made this.
because I was like, I didn't believe it. Like I just saw Michael Douglas in that really, really bad movie, and I was like, wow, that's amazing with him. But really, in addition to the makeup, though, for the authenticity, I think that Damon and Douglas really give some of their best performances.
Absolutely.
Here. Like, maybe their best. I mean, I was just thinking, I haven't seen too many HBO movies, but every one I've seen is really, really
Yeah,
good.
I got to bring one of my faves to old classics sometime because they're so good, all of them.
I mean, HBO usually delivers great stuff.
Yeah.
But man, like, just some of these movies are really good. I found the movie very enjoyable and engaging to watch. I guess it did kind of lose that part when they break up. It does border on boring, but I thought it was interesting enough. But that was really the only negative I could think of. I give it an A.
Nice. And Justin, this appeared in your top 20 of 2013.
First round.
And this is our first time talking about it on the show, so let's hear your thoughts.
Well, after Side Effects and this, all I can really say is, why did Steven Soderbergh have to retire? Behind the Candelabra is a film that's funny, other times heartbreaking, but ultimately offers up an honest portrayal of a man who never thought there was too much spectacle, which both helps and hurts the film. Damon and Douglas have great chemistry, though it's clear that Douglas is truly the better actor in the case of this film. And while I do think the spectacle fits the character, sometimes I think it becomes a little bit too much at times, and as you mentioned, Dan, it does sort of drag a little bit when it starts getting to darker territory later on. Mm-hmm. It's not necessarily that it doesn't have to be there, it's just more heading into the unpleasant, less inviting side of the film. But this is a very solid film. I enjoyed it almost as much as I did the first time around. I still give it an A-.
I can't agree. Matt Damon is so good in this. I know you're not much of a Damon fan.
He's good. I'm not denying that. I'm just saying Douglas is amazing in this.
Douglas is like one of the greats, though.
If
Douglas
this came
is
out
one
in
of the
theaters,
greats.
he
Matt
probably
Damon.
would have got a Best Actor nomination.
I
think Matt Damon would have as well.
I think Douglas
I mean,
is...
if Jonah Hill can get a nomination for Moneyball, I think
I'm with
Matt
you on
Damon
that
can
one.
certainly get a nomination for this.
That's a good point.
You know?
actually.
Yeah, all right. No, that's fair.
Come on.
If we're talking about Academy nominations, let's not go there.
Yeah, that's true.
But
There's
no,
a lot of questionable decisions.
really, though, I mean, no, Douglas gave... It's probably... Like,
It's up there for Douglas,
It's
for
like
sure.
top 5 or something.
Yeah.
Like, it's really, really good. Damon, I like Damon a lot, but this was a very different character for him. I think he played it almost as well. I think he's right up there.
Yeah,
Not
I
as
do
good
too.
as Douglas, but pretty close for me.
Well, and at the same time, the character is also not as demanding.
Yes.
As playing Liberace. That's like saying, well, Tommy Lee Jones was good in Lincoln, but he's no Daniel Day-Lewis as Lincoln. Well, of course not.
But
He's
Tommy
playing
Lee Jones
Lincoln,
was
for God's
also
sake.
excellent in his role, too.
He was.
So, yeah.
But, I think it's...
You're right.
Scott is a pretty basic character. It's a love story, and he's the jilted lover eventually, and this and that. But Liberace is Liberace.
What a
So
massive individual.
I feel like, what a massive personality to take on. So
It's a little
maybe
more
by
impressive.
comparison, yes, Douglas is probably better in the film. But in terms of, performance next to performance, I think they both do a great job.
You'll hear no argument from me. They both turn out fantastic performances. It's just I definitely think Douglas was the more expansive one. But I think the Lincoln comparison's reasonably fair.
It's a good one.
Thank you. We talk about Lincoln a lot on this show, by the way.
Yes, we do.
It's because we skipped
And yet
it.
we never ran it.
No. Joe...
I'll probably run it because...
Joe will run it for old classics
like,
sometime when we have 3 hours to kill.
I will admit, it was like, we got to talk about Lincoln. I mean, we can all give it, high grades and then argue about, how you think it's too long.
That's true.
But,
it is too long.
It's Lincoln, we'll go there. We'll go
Story
there.
for another day.
Yeah.
Story for another day.
But it's like the old Silence of the Lambs.
Exactly.
I don't know.
comes
I know
up.
we had to put a moratorium on that one.
And
All right. Anyway, it all stems back from the full Lincoln joke, I think.
yeah,
Basically.
that from that horrible movie.
The only good joke in Sex Tape.
blame sex tape for
Yeah.
it. So, but yeah, I really didn't find any major faults in it. I know you guys thought it kind of lost it a bit there, but I thought it was good. It kind of took a darker
I mean,
path.
I thought the story was still interesting, but I think it just has a little bit of a struggle with the change in tone.
Maybe
Slight.
Yeah, it loses that sort of intrigue, I think.
But I think that most of the intrigue comes from them playing off each other.
Yeah.
And if they break up,
That's
That
true.
intrigue's gone.
you're gonna have to have that. So
Yeah.
But they still do play off each other in a couple of scenes.
True. Yeah.
You've got the scene with Paul Reiser as the lawyer. You've got the scene at the end of the film.
true.
So I think they still get a couple of chances to do that. But you're right. Maybe that's part of it too. That we don't see them as much in the last say 20 minutes of the movie. But well, I'm glad you got to see it, Joe.
Yeah.
Another HBO home run.
wow. I've only seen a couple of them, but they're
Listen
all
to Normal Heart.
normal heart. Actually, I did see The Lost Battalion a long
Oh,
time,
okay.
an older one, which is really, really good
That's
too.
one I've not seen.
You'd probably like it, Dan. I know you're not a big war movie guy, but it's another World War One movie,
Oh, I do like World War One.
and it's
Movies.
really, really good.
Yeah.
It's really good.
All right.
I might run that one since HBO films seem to be a favorite of
Staple.
yours.
They're very good.
Yeah.
All right, well, Joe, since we're on you, let's go to you next because your old classic was up this week, and that's 12 Monkeys.
All right. 12 Monkeys is a 1995 American science fiction film directed by Terry Gilliam and inspired by Chris Marker's 1962 short film Le Jetée, and stars Bruce Willis, Madeline Stowe from Last of the Mohicans, and Brad Pitt, along with Christopher Plummer. Bruce Willis is James Cole, a prisoner from the near future who is sent back in time to stop a deadly virus which has nearly wiped out all of humanity. supposedly unleashed by the titular group, the 12 Monkeys. He is accidentally sent to the wrong time and place and ends up admitted as a mental patient. There he attempts to enlist the help of a psychiatrist played by Madeline Stowe and a patient played by Pitt. The movie is often considered a modern sci-fi classic, and it's easy to see why. The direction is great here, keeping the mystery intense and intriguing. The atmosphere is strange and claustrophobic at times, and I think each of the actors is at the top of their game, especially Bruce Willis, who plays a more vulnerable character than normal. I do think that the ending is perhaps a bit bleak and doesn't wrap things up quite as neat enough for my liking, and Pitt's performance is good, but does perhaps border on the outlandish at times. Overall, though, it's a very well-made movie, and I give it an A.
Justin?
Director Terry Gilliam is very much a love him or loathe him kind of director, but I like to think 12 Monkeys is arguably one of his most accessible films, save maybe his Monty Python work.
That's pretty accurate, yeah.
He tells a twisted story that keeps one guessing until the final moments, and uses both elements from the past as well as in the future to help the overall mystery unravel. Unfortunately, not all of it works, and some of the media undertones are a bit heavy-handed at times, and while I enjoyed the homage to Vertigo later on in the film, it also feels a bit superfluous. But thankfully, the cast is completely game for this movie. I agree with you a little bit on Pitt. I really liked his performance the first time around. This time I think it's a little overkill, but I mean, just slightly. I did like the way he plays crazy. And I think because of this, it helps keep these flaws reasonably out of the open. I give it a B+.
Well, I thought this was a great movie. This is my first time through on 12 Monkeys. It looks fantastic. It is directed very well. It has a great story, tons of fun twists, and I think Pitt easily gives one of his great early performances
Did
here.
get nominated.
Yeah, and I can see why. I mean, it's I would say right up there with Seven, maybe Fight Club even.
Yeah, it's up there.
It's
You know, the movie is clever and interesting, but what I like the most about it is that Gilliam has figured out how to make a smartly, artfully directed film for the mainstream that doesn't come off as pretentious or egotistical. It reminds me a lot of Black Swan in that vein with Aronofsky. You can do something new and brilliant and not shove it in everyone's face. Just be brilliant. You can let the story and the characters speak for how great the movie is, and both parts do that here. Willis is phenomenal, one of his best performances, I would say. I like how he talked about how he had a sixth sense in it. That made me happy. But I'm with you, Joe. I give it an A. I thought it was fantastic. So, Justin, this was the second time for you. Better or worse? Or was it about a B+, the first time around?
About even. I mean,
Okay.
There's definitely things I love about this movie. It's one of those I enjoy turning on just to watch sometimes. I love the score. I mean, heck, if you can make an accordion work as an intense instrument, you gotta love it. I think sometimes Gilliam's super close-up direction is good and bad. Sometimes it becomes a little too claustrophobic. Other times it works really, really well fitting in with the atmosphere, i.e. most of the asylum stuff. But I think sometimes he goes a little too cartoonish at times, more so than usual for him.
I think it's pretty restrained for him.
It's restrained for him, but it's still noticeable. Is my point.
Yeah, but I think that's his distinctive style.
It is, but my point is, I think there's a time and a place. Does he tone it back a little bit more in some of his other work? Yes. Is it still relatively noticeable and kind of frustrating a little bit?
I'm surprised you didn't like it more, actually.
No, I mean it's a good movie, and I do like the performances. Willis's performance I think is okay. It's not my favorite.
You know,
I think this is a great Willis performance.
This is very outside of the box for Bruce Willis.
That's not my point. I'm just saying I don't think it's his best. I just don't think it's one of his best performances.
Well, what would you say one of his best performances? Just, I'm curious, your standard.
Unbreakable, probably.
Unbreakable is a very good performance.
Yeah.
But that's also more aligned with a lot of his similar characters. I mean, if you think about it, he's playing a tough guy who's not,
And who's
acclaimed.
he playing in 12 Monkeys? A tough guy.
A tough guy, but I think there's more layers. And
I was going to
dimensions.
say, this character's a lot more layered, I feel like, than in Unbreakable.
You don't think the main character of Unbreakable isn't layered?
No, he was layered in Unbreakable, but
Not as much as this.
But Bruce Willis in Unbreakable is playing a character that's more aligned with his general character's strong, silent type, basically.
Yeah.
There's more going on with the character, but his performance is not as distinctive as, say, The Kid, which came out the same year. Like, seriously. I mean,
Okay, I
Disney's
think
The
that's a little
Kid?
unfair, Joe.
no,
Oh,
it's not
man.
unfair because, in all honesty, he's playing a very similar character in a different movie. I'm just saying.
Don't agree with that, but
To be honest, this is one of the best Bruce Willis performances. He's definitely playing something very different. I'm surprised you don't like it because it's.
I don't know. I give his performance like a B. I mean, I wouldn't say it was amazing. My biggest issue with this movie is I feel like come the third act it gets a little pretentious. I figured out the twist probably 15 minutes in advance.
Not me. It definitely got me.
Hey, the ending is the only thing about the movie I don't particularly like. So take that as you will.
I mean, I would say if we did a top 5 Willis performances, this is easily top 3 for me. I mean, I thought it was great.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's very different than most of his performances, which I think is
what I
something
liked
that
about
stands
it.
out. It's like, you see what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah,
I'm
absolutely.
curious, like, any given actor this, like, in Unbreakable, it's a great performance for Bruce Willis, but
Yeah, it is.
Isn't it more aligned to his general persona?
Yes, and I mean, Bruce Willis branching out for me is quite hit or miss.
Mm-hmm.
But I think here he is, trying some new things, and they all work. I mean, Unbreakable, yeah. I would say, though, if you're going to say, yes, his character is very layered in Unbreakable, that's true. I would say Samuel L. Jackson's character is much more layered in Unbreakable than his.
On that, we can agree.
So, I mean, in terms of that. I mean, Sixth Sense, another good performance, but I would say this is better than that as well.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. So, it's interesting it didn't work for you, Justin, but I think this is one of Bruce Willis's best performances, really.
I can't agree that Pitt's performance
It's a little...
is a little bit
It's memorable,
cartoony, but it's very memorable. And in terms of the earlier Pitt performances, because this was before either of those movies I mentioned, Seven and Fight Club, I mean, I think this is his first really interesting performance.
This is where he was starting to break out of the pretty boy persona.
Yeah, basically.
Legends of the Fall.
Legends of the Fall.
Oh, Legends of the Fall.
And Thelma and Louise. I mean,
I liked his performance in Thelma and Louise, but...
Yeah, but I mean...
It's still kind of,
But he played Brad Pitt. He played a pretty boy,
Yeah,
This is
fair.
definitely out of the realm of what we were used to seeing.
That's true. That's true.
So I loved it, Joe. Good pick.
Good. Thank you. Glad you liked it.
So our final film is our Oscar A to Z, and that's The Asphalt Jungle. This is from 1950, and it had 4 nominations. No wins, but it got nominated for Supporting Actor for Sam Jaffe, Best Director, Best Adapted Screenplay, and Best Cinematography in the Black and White category. Justin?
Okay, let's wrap this up. Shortly after being released from prison, Doc, played by Sam Jaffe, has a plan for a multi-million-dollar heist and starts recruiting men to carry it out. Among them, Dix Hanley, played by Sterling Hayden, as the group's gunman trying to get out of his own personal debts. Though after a series of bad luck and betrayals ensue, Doc and his team must find a way to evade the police if they intend to keep their money. In director John Huston's intro, he talks about how these characters aren't the most likable, but they are incredibly interesting. I may not always love his work, but on this note we can definitely agree. None of these characters are necessarily the easiest to get behind, but each character is so devoted to fulfilling their role that the dark twists and turns roll out with expert timing. That said, while the acting, and especially cinematography and lighting, are spot on, the story does go on just slightly too long, and maybe has a few too many characters, but otherwise I thought this was a very worthy addition in our Oscar list. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I give it an A.
Wow. Well, the most striking thing about the film for me was how it's taken from the criminal's perspective in an era of filmmaking where we really only saw crime stories from the law's side. So it's clearly groundbreaking there. The acting is solid enough. Nobody blew me away, but I thought it was good. But it bothers me that the cover of the DVD includes Marilyn Monroe. Some covers even list her as the star of the film. She barely has a cameo in this. And honestly, her character is pretty much the worst one. If she wasn't played by Marilyn Monroe, no one would care about that character at all. I think there's some good dialogue here. Maybe the characters aren't jump off the screen interesting, but it is easy to see why this is regarded as a crime classic. It's a B+ for me. Joe?
I thought that thing that I noticed the most about this movie for me was I thought that it was incredibly well shot. I thought there were some aspects of the cinematography that seemed very ahead of its time, even though it was kind of sticking with the general noir aesthetic. Mm-hmm. I thought the dialogue was excellent also. And the performances were good. I thought some of the characters were interesting, others not so much. But the atmosphere really kept the plot going for most of the film. But then it feels like it kind of loses its momentum. Maybe that's because it actually does go on a little too long. Mm-hmm. I felt myself kind of
it's a little long.
Getting bogged down by some of the details of the actual heist. I feel like it also could have ended about 5 times, which bugged me a little bit as well. But it does have some great aspects, even though it's not perfect. I'll leave it with an A minus.
Okay, right in between. I do think it's a little bit long. They could have trimmed... Well, and there's too many characters.
I'll give you the too many characters.
You know, I
part,
think
but,
if you trim out some of the characters, you lose 10 minutes of the movie.
Easily.
but honestly, I was okay with where and how it ended.
I was okay with where and how it ended, but the journey to get there was a little long.
There was like a whole sequence that was fun, but could have easily been just taken out of the movie. There are a couple of those.
Yeah. I mean, I agree it's directed very well.
Yes.
Certainly. This is really the first noir movie, Justin, you pointed this out, that we really have talked about on the show. Certainly for the Oscar list. Maybe an old classic at some point.
I feel
Does
like
Brick count?
there's one or
No.
two
I
movies.
didn't think so, but I figured I'd
I
bring
feel
it
like
up.
there's one or two Oscar movies.
Well,
that I
Roger
think
Rabbit, I suppose.
Roger technically
It
counts.
technically is kind
yeah.
of film noir.
I always
but
forget the one,
different tone.
Takes place in like
Algiers.
France. Yes.
Right?
Algiers was technically noir. I think,
Okay, that's fair, I guess.
which I actually liked.
This one I think was more...
Solid.
Well, it was more of
Refined.
what we think of when we think of noir.
Yeah,
I feel
That's
like.
true.
Traditionally,
Traditional noir.
but I think that
would
one would have
say.
counted as well.
I suppose you're right about that.
Yeah, it's accurate.
It's kind of a forgettable movie. So
I remember,
this one I think is more memorable than Algiers
only
for sure.
remember Algiers because of the terrible quality.
Yes.
I
Well,
did
it was
like the
from what, like
performances in that.
1931 or something.
No, it was a good movie. I
Yeah.
just thought that the quality was so bad, and I just remember like they didn't refine it. It's a couple of the
Yeah.
Oscars they haven't taken care of that way.
Right. Yeah, they haven't restored some of them, unfortunately.
But you'd think they would, but
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, if you've been nominated for Oscars,
you'd want to
Somebody
lose
would
the test
test
of
it.
time.
and yeah, and the print of the movie still exists, you should clean it up. But this movie looks great. Certainly.
Very.
Oh
good.
yeah,
No, I mean, I thought it was good. I just, you know,
could have been better for you.
Yeah, it definitely could have been better. I thought it drug a little bit, and too many characters.
It did drag a little bit.
Yeah, for me. All right, well, that is going to do it for the show this week. Joe, you've got the Merlin channel. Anything new and interesting up there?
Oh, just getting out some new character analysis, and I think I'm going to be doing a couple of little blogs I'll be putting out, maybe one tonight.
Oh, very
How
interesting.
about that?
All right, and listeners, we have our listener's choice next week, and that has already been selected, but never too early to get one in for next month. So you can suggest one on the YouTube channel here, which if you have not subscribed to yet, please go ahead and do that. We also have the Facebook group, Film Fanatics with an exclamation point, and our Twitter feed, @FilmFanaticsPod, and our 5-word reviews are there weekly, both the Facebook group and the Twitter. So thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you back here next week. Bye!